That's right. Welcome back to Jeff Koinange Live. And yes, powered by Telcom. Telcom, moving with you. PLO Lumumba, Barack Maluka in the house. Conversation has been sizzling. The kind of conversation we need in this country at this time. By the way, gentlemen, Father Wamugunda Wakimani sends his salams. He says you guys are doing a good job. Keep it up.
Yes,
also, Senate Speaker Ken Lusaka, he sends his greetings.
Asante.
And one more. Patrick Njiru.
Oh, Patrick.
Yes,
the rally is on.
Yeah. He's also enjoying the conversation. And so are millions or more Kenyans. Gentlemen, Barack, you first. The next 5 years, if you were to look ahead, if you were to look into that crystal ball, what do you see?
Darkness at noon. If things carry on, you can't have President Kenyatta saying one thing and his lieutenants are saying very different things. And when you look at where we have been, you will see that we have had good words before. It's not the first time we are hearing good words, whether it's reading a riot act to those from the innermost sanctum, the innermost recesses of his government. We have heard about people who do not deliver. We have heard about people who are corrupt. We have heard about the need to bring the nation together. The 2013 election was campaigned on the platform of national cohesion and integration. Today, almost 5 years later, it's still the same story. That there are words which are spoken and they vaporize the moment they leave the lips of the speakers. We start wondering whether President Kenyatta invites his speech writers and tells them to read or to write, or whether he tells them what he would like them to include in his text. And remember, when I say President Kenyatta, I do so with reservations, because the fraternity which, as he says, I belong to, has yet to recognize. And so we are already in a crisis situation, because we don't know whether this is the extended incumbency. And I know that PLO is about to serve as a verbal salvo. Served,
you can feel it coming.
I feel it coming.
Yes.
Served in what he calls the dust, the dry dust of the blinding dry dust of the law. So going further ahead, it's going to be difficult. This situation here needs to be resolved through what we have been calling for, electoral justice, that he needs to accept that we come together and wrap our minds around this question of electoral justice.
Okay, before PLO answers, sorry Barack to cut you off, before PLO answers, real quick, are we more divided now than we were 5 years ago?
Indeed, you just read my mind, because that's where I was coming, that this question of national cohesion and integration, I think our fortunes in that regard have never been lower than they are today. We are at the nadir of our fortunes as a nation. In 1964-65, Tom Mboya was talking about the challenge of nationhood. He was not talking about building roads. If he was talking about building roads, it was only to the extent that these roads would be found in Emmanuel, as in Yimbo, and as in Lamu, and therefore all of us would feel that we belonged. That which took us to Lancaster has been lost. Remember that when we went to Lancaster, the colonial masters were going away, and we had every option to say that we in Emmanuel do not wish to be part of the new independent Kenyan nation. We would like to carve out our own territory, which we are going to call whatever name, Kadoma, or whatever name we may want to give it. But wisdom dictated that we come together and remain together as the colonial masters had put us together. Before they did that, we were independent All these 42 or 44, whatever number we have today, were independent nations, complete in themselves. We had a challenge under Mzee Kenyatta. We had a challenge under Mzee Moi. We had a challenge under Mwai Kibaki. But when President Uhuru Kenyatta took over in 2013, he came having decided very clearly that he was going to be focused on a certain kind of divisive political philosophy. And let me just say one little thing, give you a little anecdote. You know, in the year 2002, I personally had a lot of faith in Uhuru Kenyatta.
When he first ran?
When he first ran. I voted for him in Emanyudia. And my wife looked at me and she didn't believe I was doing the right thing. She voted for Mwai Kibaki. I voted for Uhuru Kenyatta.
And what changed
and I said, here is a young man who is getting into this arena for the first time, gone to good schools, St. Mary's School, where you went.
Correct.
And my sons went.
Fantastic.
And they are as Ben as yourself. And as I thought he ought to be, Mr. Kenyatta, here is somebody who went to Amherst, who has mingled with the royalty of the world, who has traveled, who has been exposed, who knows about the futility of focusing on village politics. And I said, this is the person who is going to mark a new beginning. And indeed, for a while, he walked that path. We saw him here in Uhuru Park on, I think, the third day after the futile 2005 constitutional referendum, speaking to us. Jomo Kenyatta, his father, would say, his people, the Kikuyu. You remember that book which Jomo Kenyatta wrote?
Indeed.
Called My People, the Kikuyu?
Yes.
My People, the Kikuyu. And Uhuru Kenyatta addressed his people, the Kikuyu, from the heart, and told them that they must be part of this country, and told them that any effort to establish an ethnic hegemony would lead this country to disaster. He said those words himself from his lips here in Uhuru Park. Then in 2006, the country lost him. So when he came back in 2013, he had an agenda, and it has been a very divisive agenda. I don't know how we will ever correct it.
Pielo, do you agree with that? Has he been maybe hijacked?
Let me, first of all, take the view that I'm eternally optimistic.
Romantic.
We are talking about a country that is 54 years old, just about. It is in what one would call a midlife crisis. It is a country that remains one of the better countries in East Africa. And when I listened to President Kenyatta yesterday, he went through that history. He said how we attained our independence, the difficulties that we had in the 1960s, the difficulties that we had in 1982, the difficulties that we had in the year 2007, the difficulties that we have had between 2013 and now. And he said, moving forward, having acknowledged that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of both man and God, we now want to unite this nation. I want to give President Kenyatta the benefit of doubt. Why? I do not ignore the past, but I'm saying that to remain prisoners of the past does not help us in looking to the future. And in this regard, permit me to remember the words of Yakubu Gowon after the Biafra War. He said, at a time such as this, my Biafran brothers, the winners must not gloat and the vanquished must not be humiliated, but Nigeria must remain a single nation. And that is what I want to hear. And I heard that from President Kenyatta. It's now our duty as Kenyans, because it is said that democracy only works when there is eternal vigilance of the people. It is the duty of the people of Kenya, it's the duty of our representatives in parliament, it's the duty of those who run political parties such as Barack Muluka and others to continuously remind those in political leadership that this particular position that you hold in trust for the people of Kenya. And having taken that view, my own view is that there is no darkness at noon, that there is a new dawn. And in order for that dawn to break out into daylight so that we as a nation may celebrate as one, we must keep the presidency and this administration eternally vigilant. And that is why I'll say, even if I repeat myself times without number, that every nation and every democracy is always in a constant state of negotiation. The country is continually negotiated. If we find that our 2010 constitution did not satisfy us in certain aspects, this is the time to begin to interrogate those aspects of it that did not work well. But to be a doomsday prophet, to be a Jeremiah, as in the book of the prophet Jeremiah, and to see fire and brimstone raining upon Sodom and Gomorrah is to be discouraged. What do I see when I look to the future? I see brightness. I see the policeman that is talking about being pacified. I see those policemen realizing that they have not done well. I see the rioters recognizing that demonstration is not about looting. I see those who are demonstrating recognizing that they have human rights and they have duties. And that is the Kenya that I see, a beautiful Kenya towards which we must all work. Yep. And I invite Barack Okwaro Muluka to join me in that Kenya. That
is romantic idealism.
Oh, yeah.
In its most perfect
Absolutely.
form.
I want to bring it down to
and which we know he lives on Sugar Candy Mountain, where it's Christmas 24 hours.
And I love that for Kenya. Christmas, 365 days.
Where Comrade Napoleon, and this man would make a very good Comrade Squealer. Yeah.
Barack Okwaro Maina Muluka.
You would make Patrick Otieno Lumumba.
Everyone's calling themselves by all their names. Let's keep going. But you know, at the same time, President Kenyatta has been seen weak in certain areas, not least of which is corruption. And you know, we could take a whole hour to talk about that, but we won't. But the question is, should he clean up the house now? Can he do it in terms of cracking the whip?
He must do it. He must do it. When President Kenyatta, a year into his administration in 2015, required and demanded of 6 of his cabinet ministers to resign. Yeah. I said, this man has recognized that corruption is a cancer in the body politic. We sat here with Barack Okwaro Maina Muluka and agreed that even in terms of appointing members of his cabinet and his administration, we must, for symbolic reasons, see a Turkana there, see a Taveta there, see a Tiriki there, not because their presence will change our country dramatically, but it is important for the country to see that. For example, today when I see, and I hope it is not right, that a vice chancellor of Moi University, Professor Airo, has been marked down, obviously for ethnic reasons. Those are the kind of things that I want to see President Kenyatta addressing. Let us ask ourselves, why are the Luo of Kenya dissatisfied? It is not an idle question. It is a question that whether they are right or wrong, they must ask, why is a population of 4 million Kenyans dissatisfied? And we must find answers for them. Is there a need for a Marshall Plan for them? Why are the people, some people in the coastal part of Kenya, dejected? And when I heard President Kenyatta, there is a sense in which he must now, as Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere used to say, he must now stand alone. And remember that the mandate is his. There'll be no shortage of hangers-on who will want to dissuade him. But this is his watch. And if he succeeds, it is him whom history will remember. If he fails, it is him whom history will condemn. This is when he must jettison all these pretenders. And I was very happy when he said, these faceless bureaucrats who have stood in the way of justice and performance will be dealt with firmly, swiftly, and effectively, so that corruption is consigned to the museums of history, so that ethnicity and nepotism is dealt a death blow. That is what we want to urge President Kenyatta. And there is something that he said which we must not forget about. That from their side of the political divide, they are still reluctant to recognize President Kenyatta. But I want to tell them, Iran does not recognize Israel, but Israel is alive and well and a going concern. But I'll go a little further. I'm urging you, and I urge you from the bottom of my heart, when you go to the Nazarites in your inner sanctums, persuade them that there is one Kenya to work at. That Kenya has promise, and it needs all of us, hands on deck, men and equipment. And I have no doubt in my mind, when I see NASA on the other side, they are good men and women. When I see Jubilee on this side, they are good men and women. If we could unite those fire brigades, we would extinguish the fire of unemployment, the fire of ethnicity, the fire of corruption. Let us unite.
But Barack, does he have the guts to go after those closest to him, those who surround him? Can he do it?
Of course not. And my good brother Patrick Locke Otieno Lumumba Wodu Senge knows what I'm saying. That it is very valid. That he has no willpower. He has got neither the ability nor the proclivity to engage in that kind of exercise.
He has nothing to lose. No re-election, just legacy to go for. You say he doesn't have it?
You know what? You know what? When we sat here, as my brother says, we advised President Kenyatta at that time that if he did the right thing, the Kenyan nation would vote for him at the next election to a man, regardless of who else may claim to command a certain ethnic following. Because there were things which were pulsating with urgency, that when he went through those choreographed moments of reading and handing lists over to parliamentarians, Parliament stood up in ovation, including his harshest and fiercest critics. They stood up to give him a standing ovation. It was an indication that the nation was ready to move forward. When he apologized for historical injustices which are rife with narratives of corruption, Kenyans said, yes, finally. But it just turns out eventually that the same person who handed the TJRC report to Parliament today is telling us, let us not. It's not about being a captive of history. Those who do not know the lessons and mistakes of history are going to repeat the self-same mistakes. Indeed, when we say, let us come together and talk, what are we going to talk about when we say that we are not going to talk about history? Shall we sit here and pretend that life begins now? Shall we engage in some kind of collective national amnesia that there's been nothing before, that this is the beginning? When you talk about listening to the president yesterday, or listening to Mr. Kenyatta yesterday, and he's saying good things, and it's looking like he's giving the country a new promissory note, he must do a Pauline thing. He must tell us that he was on the road to Damascus. He must tell us the moment when he saw the light. He must accept that he persecuted the Lord until the Lord said, Uhuru Muigai, son of Kenyatta, why do you persecute me? And he said, Lord, who are you, Lord, that I persecute? And the Lord said, I'm the Kenyan nation, I'm Wanjiku, whom you persecute. But I will show you the way forward. and rise now and start leading the nation out of the morass of
Jeff,
corruption.
even as he continues, when he recited the Lord's Prayer yesterday,
yes,
did he not say that?
That was isomorphic mimicry.
So what?
Isomorphic mimicry.
Wow. Go on.
Yeah. Where you just gabble certain words because
you don't think he was sincere?
No, he was not sincere. I have heard those words before. Not for the first time, not for the second time. I have heard them before. And so I cannot take them seriously. I don't believe him. I don't trust him.
I will keep my brother Barack Okwaro Maina Muluka in prayers, but I will try to persuade him by reason and logic.
No, those are the kinds of prayers that God does not listen to. They are the sorts of prayers that God does not answer.
But Jeff, the prayers that I'll keep him in,
yes,
that we have a much larger thing to deal with, which is the Kenyan nation. And perhaps I'm repeating this too many times, that let us ask ourselves, I would want to know, for example, when Barack sits in the inner sanctums of NASA and he looks at the nation called Kenya with 45 million people, and he knows that there is a president who has been instituted in accordance with the Constitution and the law, what does he tell NASA? Does he tell them that we are going to be in a state of resistance until the second coming of Christ? Or does he tell him that history teaches me that whatever is done, there must be a moment of reflection when, as a nation, we reason together and we ask ourselves, what are the things that we have promised ourselves? And those things are very basic and very mundane. And I'll repeat them again, that Kenyans, to a man and a woman, if I'm to be gender sensitive, want peace, that they want justice, that they want opportunities, that they want employment, and that these can only be achieved in an environment where we are all pulling in the same direction. And that those who are in a position of leadership, there is a sense in which you must be charitable to those who are on the other side. I was watching what is going on in Syria yesterday, and all sides of the political divide are saying, we are going to meet in Geneva and everything is on the table. I'm watching what is happening in South Korea, and everybody is saying that, can we not, as a country which has not reached those levels, say we are going to sit together and discuss and negotiate about the future of our nation, not only for ourselves but for generations yet to be born? Is that too much to ask? Is that too much to ask?
You know, Barack.
Yes.
Okay, before PLO responded, you said you just don't trust him.
Yeah, because...
So the question is...
You said that before.
Okay. What would convince you, Barack? What would convince you?
What would convince me would be a Pauline moment. And I think I've said that before. When Saul of Tarsus is marching to Damascus with his contingent, and he's on a mission to persecute the Christian faithful, he sees the light. And throughout the Acts of the Apostles, he keeps on reminding us of how he once was a persecutor. He tells us what he did to Stephen and what he did to other Christian faithful. I would like to see a Zacchaeus moment where you say, Lord, if I have robbed anybody of a shilling, I repay fourfold. I'm going to repay fourfold. You must begin there where you own up. I've been asked here a question, what do you do? What do you say? You know, my good friend and brother Patrick Loch Otieno Lumumba Wodu Senge is a good disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Indeed.
And I see vestiges of Dr. King in my good friend who is seated next to me here.
Right.
And Dr. King himself was one of the highest advocates of resistance, just resistance, that when injustice becomes the law, then resistance becomes a duty. And Dr. King said that. And there is injustice which has become the law. Even when he tells us that somebody has been sworn in, he has been sworn in a context in which our children have died. My good brother, Patrick Loch Otieno Lumumba Wodu Senge, are you aware that the crown that Uhuru Kenyatta wears on his head today is caked in innocent blood? Those are things which must be admitted. Koome, who is in charge of the police in Nairobi, denies the killing of our children, which we have seen on live television. If people cannot begin by repenting, by acknowledging certain things that they have done, then all these invitations are exercises in futility. And I cannot trust them. I don't believe them. Because if you are denying that which I have seen with my eyes, how do I trust you?
Let me just pose the question. Because I personally hold the view that history is a good teacher. But if you remain a prisoner of history, then you are frozen in time. We know what has happened. We have heard and we are aware and we have seen what has happened. And we are saying, how do you move the nation forward? What does history teach us?
I've given you the formula.
History teaches us. You know, this Pauline moment, does he want President Kenyatta to be walking to the literal Damascus and then we see some light?
He's walking to Damascus even now.
What one is saying is that the president was sworn in, whether one likes it or not. That is the legal president of the Republic of Kenya. That individual was sworn in. He said that we have committed certain errors in our administration, but going forward we want to deal with them differently. If you want to be pragmatic and realistic, what you would be saying, we want to hold you to your word. And how do you hold you to a word? He said, I've started extending my hand to some of my brothers in the opposition. And what one is saying, that in the best interest of the nation, that is what one wants to do. So that one wants to raise all these issues that Barack is raising at a table where the nation is reasoning with herself, so that the nation asks fundamental questions. One, we want to preserve the nation called Kenya. We know that Kenya has been afflicted in a number of ways. We identify how it has been afflicted. We have a constitutional dispensation. We have seen that constitutional dispensation working for the last 7 years. It appears that certain aspects of that constitution have not worked very well. We have different organs of the government. We have the judiciary, we have the legislature, we have the executive, we have different agencies, including the police. There are sense in which they have not conducted themselves in a particular manner that is in the interest of the people of Kenya. How do we resolve these? Having resolved these, how can we as a nation, working together, then move forward? That is what we are saying. But to say that I mistrust you so much that I'm not even interested in discussing and negotiating with you is, if you permit me to say, is that you are being blind to the realities of the moment, and that you are forgetting that we are only trustees of future generations, and that therefore we have a duty. And also it is an assumption that we have the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom. And history teaches us that those who arrogate to themselves,
we leave history alone.
No, history teaches us that if you claim to have a monopoly of wisdom, you lead your country through a shortcut to chaos. He cited Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the exemplar of the articulation of resistance as articulated by Mahatma Gandhi. But he always ensured that his followers were disciplined, and he always led from the front. That was the history of Martin Luther King Jr. What we are seeing is not classical resistance a la Martin Luther King Jr. or a la Mahatma Gandhi. And we are saying that going forward, we can negotiate in order to relieve ourselves from that situation. I have no doubt in my mind that when the chips are down, Barack, Okwaro, Maina Muluka, when you go to ANC, which is a member of NASA, I appeal to you, Barack Okwaro, Maina Muluka, tell NASA, you are good, but respond to an outstretched hand. Don't respond with a clenched fist.
Indeed, indeed. Monica, do we have time for tweets?
When he goes
This conversation is too good.
What about when he goes to Jubilee?
I'm not in Jubilee. I'm non-aligned and positively neutral. But I'll be accused, of course.
All right, gentlemen, let's read some tweets. Captain Brown Sankala, you say, no reaching out to the opposition is a waste of time because the opposition says they don't recognize him as president. Bernard Chirchir, president being leader of all Kenyans should reach out to communities, not individuals. The focus should be local community leaders. The understanding should be on job creation, building roads and development agenda, not sharing positions. Ibrahim Dado, you say yes in reply to the question. In a country that believes in a mature democracy like Kenya, it's demanding for His Excellency the President to have a dialogue so as to ease the prolonged political crisis in the country. Hushemin Hariri, it's in the best interest of the country for them to meet and agree. I guess he means the two principles. We are tired of this killing of innocent people. Please stop. Okay, some SMSs. Mary, you say the president should reach out to Raila only for discussion on development issues. Any issue about politics and the past elections should not be discussed. Mike, you say the president should not. The opposition leaders should respect court decisions. Debbie L, you say yes, I think the president should reach out to end the chaos. It's time we reclaim peace and not political violence, which has taken and is still taking away innocent lives. Mercy, you say no need now that they don't recognize his leadership. A couple of Facebook posts. Tito Blessings, you say, why not? He is the president of all Kenyans, including Raila and the entire opposition. Anastasia Kiambuvi, you say, opposition should reach out to the president, not him to reach them. Engineer Adamson Muriki Jacob, you say, yes, if you need a united and prosperous country, they should dialogue. And Davis Nikas, you say, no justice, no peace, no need to talk, no need. Different divergent views, I guess. Everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Absolutely.
And they do speak it loud and clear and without fear or favor. Gentlemen, some closing thoughts, because this has been a very refreshing conversation. You guys are great speakers, and I learned a few words. What was this one? Isomorphic mimicry.
Yes.
That's deep.
Look it up.
I also learned your name is Maina.
Yes, of course. I'm the perfect example of a Kenyan, what should be a Kenyan citizen.
Barack Okwaro Maina Muluka.
Yes. Perfect example of what should be a Kenyan citizen. But when I speak, they don't listen. Now you see, when you hear some people saying,
yes,
oh, the president doesn't have to reach out to them, they are in the opposition. Nobody said that we should live together forever. We have been told about something here, which is being a Christian, being caught, trapped in a time warp. That time warp is that thought that we must always live together even as we hate one another. If you look at the map of Europe, it is perpetually in a state of fluidity. When people cannot live together, then they must agree to disengage. Then those who want to exercise power and say that we are superior and we are whatever, they can have their own portion. In fact, one of the things that we perhaps need to negotiate or to renegotiate is our nationhood, because there's a sense in which some of us were seceded a long time ago. He's talking about the Luo nation, and he's saying that it needs a Marshall Plan. Why does it need a Marshall Plan? He's talking about the coastal communities. We are seeing young people who are ready to walk into bullets. They get into these streets knowing very well the police are going to kill somebody, and although they hope and trust that it's not going to be me, they still are marching. Something is terribly wrong, and this hubris that you are seeing here, people saying he's the president, he should not reach out to them. We cannot live like that.
It is very sad that Barack has raised the question. He's effectively saying that there should be secession. I don't believe in that. You know, secession is...
I have not effectively said.
But he's alluding to it.
Oh, of course, it can be negotiated, yes.
You know, secession, those who talk about secession must go back to this history that we keep talking about. In 1963 and 1964, the founding fathers of Africa said and came up with the doctrine of the inviolability of the colonially inherited boundaries.
You and I have been on this platform and agreed that their unity was wicked unity, it was conspiracy.
Okay, let him normally Barack is very disciplined. I don't know what to do. But my own view is that whatever grievances we have can't be negotiated within the Kenyan nation. And part of the reason why, when we were making the constitution as a people of Kenya, we came up with devolution is because we recognize that there are certain historical disadvantages. Only yesterday, the Auditor General said that the marginalized areas will get additional funds in order to address those historical injustices. So when I hear people talking about secession or alluding to it, they must remember that the secession is like an onion. You peel it and you discover there is another layer. And you discover that there is always things to divide you, even when you go to the lowest. The Kenyan nation must remain the Kenyan nation, properly governed, with all people of Kenya realizing their potential in the context of East Africa and in the context of Africa, and I think that that can be achieved. I've been reading some articles written by Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, with whom I share some of the arguments. He says, and I agree with him, that one of the things that we should ask ourselves, how can we improve devolution? How can we improve devolution in a manner that people feel included? How can we improve devolution in a manner that all these issues of economic, social, and political inclusion are dealt with? That is the conversation that I want to hear. But when there is an attempt to suggest, even the mere suggestion, that we should negotiate certain portions of the country becoming a little country, that must be resisted, and resisted in accordance with the law, because it is actually treasonable if it is outside the law.
It is not treasonable.
Yeah.
If you look at Article 265 of the Constitution, it provides for the possibility that Kenya's territory can be negotited, and he ought to,
not true.
And he ought to know, he ought to know that. Go and read your law better. I'll bring Orengo. I'll bring Orengo to
that is completely untrue.
I didn't see that.
It's completely untrue.
If you didn't see it, I cannot hold myself responsible.
And Jeff, it is very unfortunate.
Allow me to talk. This Patrick Locho Tieno Lumumba Wodusenge has been talking too much, hogging all the time. I must also be allowed to speak
some final
a little bit.
Yes. Some final thoughts.
Now, the final thoughts. First of all, you cannot negotiate in an environment of hubris. There's a lot of hubris from that side. You saw even yesterday the celebration was not about victory for Kenya. It was about victory for certain individuals, victory for a certain...
Why do you say that, Barack? Why do you say that? Because you felt left out?
The whole mood, the whole spirit, the whole messaging, the whole going back to the 8th of August and saying that we won and such did not happen to us. That hubris must be extracted from the philosophical orientation of those who would presume to invite others to dialogue. If you would invite people to dialogue, you must first demonstrate a measure of humility. You cannot be calling us names and abusing us. And you know, when you abuse, you think you are abusing an individual, you are abusing a whole swath of peoples. Those who would think that they would want to embrace dialogue, to invite other people to dialogue, must come with humility, because you are talking about injured people, an injured population that does not feel like it's part of this country. Whether my good friend Patrick Lodge Otieno Lumumba Wodu Senge feels like that or not, he's a he's a noble Luo.
You know,
he's a noble Luo.
These are very interesting times.
Yes.
My own view is that we have a duty as patriots of Kenya to work towards maintaining Kenya and addressing the historical injustices and looking to the future. When I listened keenly yesterday to Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, I did not see hubris. I heard an individual who acknowledges that certain mistakes have been made. I heard an individual who is saying that he has, even in times of pain, been dictated by the requirements of the law. I had an individual who was saying that the time for Kenya is to come together for the sake of these generations and generations yet to be born. I had an individual who's saying that I'm already making efforts to ensure that I bring everybody on board. What we as a people ought to do is to ensure that we keep President Kenyatta faithful to those words. And as I said earlier, the mother's milk of democracy is the eternal vigilance of the population to make demands of the leaders that what they say is what they do. There must be a wedding between their words and their deeds. And that is why I am saying again, almost ad nauseum, that going forward, it is incumbent upon all leaders of whatever persuasion, from the Nazarite formation to the Jubilite formation, to come together and reason together, as was stated in the book of the prophet Isaiah. And it will be well with us if we reason together.
But before that, Isaiah had said in the same chapter, because he's quoting from chapter 1, that do what is just, do what is right. But if you do not do that, if you come to me and raise your hands and your eyes up to me in prayer and in sacrifices, I will not listen to you. So seek justice.
And that will be sought for the sake of Kenya.
So let it be written.
So let it be written. So let it be done.
Patrick Lodge Otieno Lumumba Wood
Senge, yes.
And Barack Okwaro Maina Muluka.
Wood Emanuelia.
Wood Emanuelia. Gentlemen, a great conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is the kind of conversation we need to have more of in this country going forward. These two gentlemen know what they're talking about, and they always think Kenya first, everything else second. And Kenya will remain strong, no doubt, going forward. Thanks so much for being a part of this show. You know, if it's Wednesday, it's all about those three letters on the keyboard that follow each other. JKL. And JKL is powered by Telcom. Telcom, moving with you. Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock on 96 FM with Jeff and Jalas. That's right. Join us, because it's all about a story a day. Tomorrow we're going to have a fantastic, incredible, heart-wrenching story of a young lady born with HIV, because you know Friday is World AIDS Day. December 1st it was World AIDS Day. We're going to be talking to a young lady born with HIV, still surviving. We'll hear her story. Thanks so much for being a part of this program. Oh, as I always keep saying, good night, good luck, and God bless this great nation of Kenya.